1912. A celebrated captain and his brave crew struggled for their lives in a powerful storm.
They were taking sail down. They had shifting deck cargo. They had ice building up. They were doing all of these different things just to survive.
This was a ship that had become famous in Chicago. This was the Christmas tree ship.
On land, holiday shoppers awaited the schooner and her load of evergreens.
Children got the biggest kick out of the ship and seeing the trees. This brought in the Christmas spirits.
Herman Shinnaman enjoyed the Christmas business. The whole festive part of the year lighted up his personality.
Hey, Christmas!
But that year, the ship never docked.
No one really knew what happened to the Christmas tree ship.
It's a great sea story. It's a great Christmas story. The legacy of the Christmas tree ship is many-fold.
It's the first week of December, and the Coast Guard icebreaker Mackinac has just docked at Chicago's historic Navy Pier. Today, the Mackinac is carrying a special cargo from northern Michigan. Piled on board are stacks of fresh-cut Christmas trees that will be given to needy families.
For a lot of kids here in Chicago, they come down in the morning to an empty apartment. That's not right. Kids should not be deprived of the spirit of Christmas. So we can bring trees to 1,000 families every year. So wonderful.
Oh my goodness, look at this. You're going to grab that and take it home, huh? Hey, Merry Christmas, huh? Thank you.
It's cold and rainy, but that doesn't stop the excited children from clambering aboard as volunteers help the crew decorate the Mackinac for the festive occasion. Meanwhile, hundreds of evergreens are loaded into trucks for delivery. By evening, the families have carried off their trees, ready to begin their holiday festivities. As night falls, the pier grows quiet, but the lights aboard the Mackinac can still be seen shining against the night sky. This annual event was inspired by a Lake Michigan tradition that began more than 100 years ago. It was in the era of the tall ships when a man named Herman Shinnaman began sailing a schooner laden with fresh-cut pine trees from northern Michigan to downtown Chicago. His vessel was known throughout the region as the Christmas tree ship. There were other mariners who transported Christmas trees from the far shores of the Great Lakes to Chicago. But with the help of his wife Barbara and daughters Elsie, Pearl, and Hazel, Captain Shinnaman became the best known and most beloved.
Although he sold trees, he gave many of the trees away free to poor families, orphanages, to anyone who may not have been able to afford one. The very idea of Christmas and the spirit of giving was ingrained in this family.
Over the last century, the story of Captain Shinnaman and his Christmas tree ship has become legend. But for Chicagoans in the early 1900s, he was a very real part of their holiday festivities.
It's been said Christmas didn't begin in Chicago until Captain Shinnaman docked up at the Clark Street Bridge.
Herman Shinnaman chose the Clark Street Bridge as the site for selling his trees because it was right at the edge of the downtown where the shopping district was in Chicago. He usually arrived on Thanksgiving Day, and there the Christmas tree ship would come in with a couple of Christmas trees tied up to the masts. There would often be a large number of people there gathered to greet the vessel.
Once docked on the Chicago River, the jovial Sea Dog and his crew decorated the tall ship with lights, garlands, and wreaths. Next, the captain hung a sign proclaiming the schooner open for business as he personally greeted his eager customers.
It was easy to spot Captain Shinnaman. He usually wore a leather-billed cap, and he always had a pea coat on, the traditional garb of the sailor in winter.
He was well known, been a very gregarious kind of fellow. His face is very round and his cheeks are full. He has a big bushy mustache, and to me there's a definite twinkle in his eye.
For a young boy, stepping aboard, the ship itself must have been an adventure.
It was 1911 when just such a boy went with his father to buy a Christmas tree from Captain Shinnaman. Philip Sander had never seen the Christmas tree ship before, and the 5-year-old was about to have the adventure of a lifetime.
As we walked to the ship, the air was just permeated with the smell of evergreens. When we arrived at the dock, it was decorated from mast to riggings with Christmas trees. And of course, there were thousands of trees laid out in the dock.
Can't imagine that it didn't make the young one's heart soar just to even be able to step aboard and shake hands with the captain.
My father came up to meet Captain Herman. He talked to him in German. He said, "Guten Morgen, Captain. Wie geht's du?" In German. "How are you?" And he hit it off right away with him. We met his family, Barbara, and the children. And so the captain says, "You come up on deck." So he showed us all around the ship.
Down below in the cabin, Shinnaman's family transformed some of these trees into beautiful wreaths and garlands and other kinds of Christmas decorations. And they'd have the fire going in the stove, and it would be warm, and there'd be coffee and perhaps some food.
The Shinnaman's hospitality did not end there.
He invited my family to a Christmas dinner, and I remember distinctly that the main course was venison and a bear roast. After we got done with dinner, the captain invited us to the parlor, and he had a beautiful Christmas tree. Everybody starts singing German songs. Heilige Nacht, Heilige Nacht, O Tannenbaum, all the German songs. Oh boy, that was something. That was a great experience for me. But it was a great thrill. It was something I'll never forget.
By 1911, the captain had been delivering Christmas trees for over 20 years.
Captain Shinnaman really was a highlight to the Chicago people at Christmas time.
His arrival always ushered in the spirit of the holiday season. But the enterprise was a risky business. Every captain of a tall ship knew that sailing the Great Lakes in November was extremely dangerous. And when autumn winds turned bitter cold, the 300-mile-long lake became treacherous. The bottom of Lake Michigan held the wreckage of hundreds of wooden vessels that never made it back to port.
Mother Nature is much more wicked in November, and there wasn't a real reliable weather forecasting system either.
So much of the weather forecasts were a farmer's almanac guess, a judgment by looking at the sky, the coloring, red sky in morning, sailor take warning, red sky at night, sailor's delight. Much of it was by gut and by instinct.
The Great Lakes were affected by at least 3 different weather fronts. And back in the old days, you couldn't see those coming.
Even the most experienced mariner could be fooled by the skies. A blizzard could strike without warning, encasing ships in snow and ice, often sending them to the bottom.
There was a lot of danger of the ships literally freezing up. If ice formed on the ropes and the rigging, they couldn't move the ropes through the pulleys.
Ice destabilized these sailing ships tremendously.
Yet, as sure as the arrival of the holiday season, Captain Shinnaman believed he would always be able to deliver his cargo of Christmas trees and spread holiday cheer. Chicagoans in the early 1900s, the holiday season did not begin until they bought a Christmas tree from Herman Shinnaman. With the help of his wife and daughters, the captain sold thousands of evergreens each year right off the deck of his festively decorated schooner.
Well, you got yourself a good one.
He enjoyed the Christmas business, the whole festive part of the year, just kind of lighted up his personality.
Herman's love of old world Christmas traditions and his passion for the sea began in his childhood. He was born in 1865 and grew up in Algoma, Wisconsin, a small fishing village on the shore of Lake Michigan. Sailing was a way of life in Algoma, and for boys like Herman, the allure of tall ships was irresistible.
It was a wonderful thing for kids to see these, white-winged ships coming into their port, and the sailors were sort of like heroes to a lot of the kids. They definitely were the men that they wanted to emulate.
Herman's older brother August was the first in the family to become a mariner.
I'm doing pretty good here.
Herman quickly followed in his brother's footsteps.
Herman Shinnaman was able to go ahead and move up the ranks very quickly. By the time he was 23 years old, he owned a share of his own vessel and had a master's license, which was a very impressive accomplishment.
Eventually, Herman and August became partners in their own shipping business.
The Shinnamans captained the ships and staffed them with their own crew.
Most of the journeys the Shinnamans made were bringing lumber down from Michigan or Wisconsin ports to the great lumber market in Chicago.
They had wonderful adventures together. It wasn't unlike these captains, for instance, to race each other from port to port. The most skillful sailor was the one who could make it in a tricky weather condition, for instance.
Herman and August moved to Chicago in the late 1800s to take advantage of the city's booming shipping industry.
It wasn't unusual to look out on the lakefront of Chicago and see 100 tall ships go by.
Herman and his brother enjoyed the excitement of sailing, but they knew life on the Great Lakes could be deadly. Most sailors worked from April to November and hoped to be safely moored before winter weather made Lake Michigan treacherous.
No matter how well your business was run, you could suffer catastrophic losses with one storm.
The weather conditions on the Great Lakes could be horrendous. And it could be not only as dangerous, but even more dangerous than sailing on the oceans.
Year after year, the brothers took these risks in stride. They had sailing in their blood and would forever be drawn to the vast open waters of Lake Michigan. Besides, their business was thriving, and a natural extension of the lumber trade was selling Christmas trees. The tradition of decorating an evergreen during the holiday season was introduced to Americans by German immigrants.
Chicago had a very large German population, and in fact, the largest single ethnic group in Chicago was the German community. And their tradition of the Christmas tree was being adopted by people all over the city.
The last run each season was for evergreens, and the Shinnaman brothers found that the November voyage was often their most lucrative. By 1891, Herman Shinnaman had become a successful businessman and a respected sailor. The 25-year-old decided it was time to settle down, and that spring, the captain got married.
His wife was Barbara Schindel. She was actually born in Germany, but immigrated with her parents when she was 7 years old.
Barbara was a strong-willed woman who shared her husband's adventurous spirit. During the first year of their marriage, she spent the winter aboard one of Herman's ships. Soon, the Shinnamans had a baby daughter named Elsie and settled into a modest home on Chicago's north side. Herman worked harder than ever to support his new family.
Being a Great Lakes sailor was seasonal work, so you had to make enough money during that shipping season to see you and your family through the rest of the time.
That made the profitable and festive Christmas tree business even more important to Herman Shinnaman.
The amount that he could make in 1 year from the Christmas tree trade would be enough that the family could live for an entire year off that amount of money.
Shinnaman owned several different ships and used his profits to buy land in Michigan, where he and his crew harvested trees each season. In the fall of 1898, Barbara gave birth to twin girls, Hazel and Pearl. Herman did not want to leave his wife so soon after the delivery, so he decided that his brother August should make that year's Christmas tree voyage without him. On the night of November 9th, August's ship, the Estfall, fully loaded with Christmas trees, was struck by a fierce gale 20 miles north of Chicago. After crashing onto a sandbank, the schooner was pounded by the surf throughout the night and slowly torn apart. All hands were lost. Herman was devastated by August's death. His brother had been his mentor and best friend. And after nearly 15 years of hard work, the business they had built together was in jeopardy.
To have lost that cargo of trees would mean not only losing a huge amount of income, but then also incurring a large amount of debt.
In the years that followed, Herman Shinnaman's finances rose and fell, but he and his family could always be seen docked in Chicago at Christmas time, spreading holiday cheer.
This was their life, the Christmas tree ships, the making of the wreaths, the selling of the trees. This was who they were as people.
The children got the biggest kick out of the ship and seeing the Christmas trees. This brought in the Christmas spirits.
1912 was another lean year for the Shinnaman family. Herman was over $4,000 in debt, and he desperately needed a successful Christmas tree season.
All the way together!
That fall, Captain Shinnaman and his crew prepared to make their last run of the year in a three-masted schooner named the Rouse Simmons. As they set sail on a crisp October morning, the famous captain waved goodbye to his family. He had no way of knowing that he was about to face the deadliest storm of his career. October 1912. Captain Herman Shinnaman and his crew set sail from the Chicago River aboard the Rouse Simmons. Shinnaman and the crew of the Christmas tree ship were bound for Michigan's Upper Peninsula to cut evergreens for the holidays. The 44-year-old wooden ship had a long and distinguished career on the Great Lakes. The ship had been built with a double centerboard, which gave it extra stability. Still, many felt it was time to decommission the old schooner.
The Rouse Simmons, come 1912, was in very much the twilight of its sailing days. The sails were patched and worn, and the ship was on pretty much its last leg.
When a vessel is as old as the Rouse Simmons, it needs regular maintenance. And Herman Shinnaman initially was very good about this, making sure the vessel was caulked before winter voyages, making sure that its canvas was good, making sure that her sails and spars in place was all of good quality. But he got careless.
Because of his financial difficulties, Captain Shinnaman could not afford to caulk the ship's hull that year.
The Rouse Simmons needed it. That ship, just sitting there dockside, had to be pumped out 2 or 3 times a day or it would just sink. It was filling up with water so fast.
Still, problems like these were common for wooden ships, and Captain Shinnaman desperately needed the financial boost that this profitable trip would bring. Besides, the captain prided himself on delivering Chicagoans their Christmas trees every winter. He wouldn't think of canceling his favorite voyage of the year. After a 2-day trip, the Rouse Simmons arrived at Thompson Pier, near the village of Manistique, Michigan, 300 miles northeast of Chicago. As soon as the ship was tied up, the crew grabbed their saws and went to work.
They'd head off into the woods for 3 weeks or so, cutting Christmas trees.
They would go over the clear-cut land and using just hatchets and small cross-cut saws and loading them on wagons and bringing them down to the lake shore.
The Rouse Simmons would hold somewhere between 10, maybe 15,000 Christmas trees.
Before they were packed on board, they were bound. And they would fill the hold of the ship with trees, but then they would also stack them on the deck.
On top of that deck house, he would load a cargo of more trees, bundles and bundles of more Christmas trees.
Captain Shinnaman made sure every foot of space was filled with Christmas trees.
Eyewitnesses at the time referred to the Shinnaman ship as looking as a floating forest. The last tree brought aboard was tied to the top mast to crown the ship, that those on shore would recognize it while sailing on the waters as the Christmas tree ship.
The morning of November 22nd dawned bright and clear as the crew of the Rouse Simmons prepared for their voyage back to Chicago.
It was a beautiful day for sailing. The trouble was, that vessel was so heavily loaded that they couldn't pull her out of the berth. The tugboat had to keep pulling and twisting her for the whole day. And so by the time the Rouse Simmons finally was pulled out of Thompson Harbor, it was near dark. And that wonderful sailing weather had changed, and a gale was bearing down on them.
Captain Shinnaman had been sailing on Lake Michigan for over 20 years and trusted his instincts. As he sailed out of the harbor, he must have felt that his ship could make it.
The wind was coming out of the northwest, which really would have been a very favorable wind for them. Perhaps the captain was thinking that if they took advantage of that wind, they could actually get ahead of the storm and they'd make it to Chicago in record time.
Other sailors were less confident about the weather that day.
In fact, another schooner, the Butcher Boy, started heading into the harbor at the same time the Rouse Simmons was coming out. And the captain there, Captain Hansen, was stunned to see the Rouse Simmons, way overloaded, heading out. He said to his men, "If those boys don't go to the bottom, I'll be surprised."
Aboard the Rouse Simmons, the crew prepared for a rough ride. The winds turned violent as the sun set. The schooner was blasted by rain and wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour.
Shinnaman was running into very, very heavy weather from the northwest.
Energized by the powerful storm, the icy waters of Lake Michigan became treacherous.
Waves on the Great Lakes don't build up to the kind of height you see on the ocean. That doesn't mean you don't get a 20-foot, 25-foot wave, however.
Waves crashed over the bow, drenching the tightly bound cargo of evergreens.
The storm took a turn for the worse. There was a full gale blowing. The lake had turned into a disaster.
As the temperature dropped, the rain turned to snow. Far from shore, the Rouse Simmons now found itself in the teeth of a powerful blizzard.
It was a scary night. They probably had their sails close reefed, so they wouldn't catch a lot of the wind, so they could keep her under control. The wind was cold. The snow began to mix in with the gale. Visibility would have been virtually nil out there.
Ice crept over the schooner, making it dangerously top-heavy.
Here's a ship that had a deck house full of trees built on the top of it, and then you put ice on top of that. That ship is going to be vulnerable to capsizing. Fortunately, the Rouse Simmons, unlike most lake schooners, had a double centerboard, and that double centerboard gave it a heck of a lot of stability.
Amazingly, Captain Shinnaman and his crew were able to keep the battered schooner sailing through the long, cold night.
It was probably a pretty happy crew that saw the dawn on the morning of the 23rd.
The improved visibility gave the crew a little hope. But the Christmas tree ship was not out of danger.
It was a bad day for anybody out on the lake. For those that couldn't get into harbor fast enough and got trapped out on those churning waters, it was a terrible time. Winter came in that year with a vengeance.
November 23rd, 1912. For more than 10 hours, the crew of the Rouse Simmons had been fighting for their lives, battling a fierce Lake Michigan storm as they made their way back to Chicago. Already weighted down with more than 10,000 Christmas trees, the three-masted schooner was now covered in ice and snow, making it almost impossible to control.
Everything on the vessel is harder to work because you're cold, you're freezing, and the vessel is as well.
There were 4 sightings of the ship that give us a clue as to how she bore up in the storm. The first of those sightings was at 9 o'clock or so in the morning. The steamer Panay spotted the Rouse Simmons. She seemed to be bearing up well in the northwest wind.
Then, at 2 p.m., the car ferry Ann Arbor spotted the Rouse Simmons heading toward the coast of Wisconsin.
They looked at the vessel and they thought she might be in distress, and the ship appeared to be listing dramatically.
There was some debate as to whether it was really in trouble or whether it was just adapting to the circumstances. They had taken down the mainsails and were sailing just with foresails and staysails.
The captain of the Ann Arbor decided not to come to the aid of the Rouse Simmons because the schooner was not displaying a distress signal.
If a ship's in danger, there's a number of ways for it to signal for assistance. The most clear and obvious way is to run up the stars and stripes upside down and half-mast. The Rouse Simmons carried a flag, we know that, and so she would have been able to signal if she was in distress. But there was no distress signal that morning.
It might not have been that easy to raise a distress signal under those conditions.
They were taking sail down. They had shifting deck cargo. They had ice building up. They were doing all of these different things just to survive. They were also probably going hypothermic and getting more and more tired. The fatigue was setting in, and to do the simplest jobs would have required superhuman effort.
At 3 p.m., a member of the U.S. Life-Saving Station in Kewanee, Wisconsin, caught sight of the struggling vessel 5 miles offshore. The Rouse Simmons was now bearing her colors at half-mast, a clear signal that they were in desperate need of help.
The captain of the life-saving station figured he couldn't reach the ship himself. So what he did instead is called over to Two Rivers, Wisconsin, which was the next life-saving station south of him.
In the days before the Coast Guard, the men who worked for the U.S. life-saving stations were the last hope for a vessel in distress. Captain George Soggy of the Two Rivers Station answered the call. Soggy believed in the motto of his profession. You have to go out, but you don't have to come back. He threw on his foul weather gear, roused his crew, and launched his lifeboat into the bitter, cold surf.
Captain Soggy was a veteran lake mariner. He'd been in the same position Shinnaman was in many a time himself.
At 4:20, Captain Soggy and his crew were 6 miles north of the station. They knew that if the troubled schooner had stuck to her last known course, she should have been visible by now.
The storm was getting extremely dangerous for any kind of vessel to be out on the lake. And after hours of cold, fruitless search, they finally had to call it quits just for their own safety.
You have to keep in mind just how difficult it is to find something in the middle of a storm. It was a long shot that they could actually find the Simmons.
They spent quite a bit of time out on the lake. They found absolutely no evidence of a shipwreck.
Where was the Rouse Simmons? Back in Chicago, Captain Shinnaman's wife and daughters were completely unaware of the blizzard that had pounded the vessel. Then, on Sunday, November 24th, the storm hit Chicago full force.
There were breakers coming ashore in Chicago that were 20, 30 feet high, and Barbara Shinnaman could look out her window and see the white waves. She knew that this was a very dangerous storm.
When the Rouse Simmons didn't show up by Thanksgiving Day, the family members went to the life-saving station in Chicago and asked them to investigate.
The captain's family still hoped that he was somewhere safe, waiting out the storm.
Many ships were missing in the storm, and it was not unusual whatsoever for a ship to pull into a port for a day or two or several days.
News of the missing schooner and its famous captain spread from one shore of Lake Michigan to the other.
This wasn't just any ship. This was the Christmas tree ship. And so when this ship was late, it was something that was noticed by a lot of people.
And many in Chicago began to fear the worst.
My father told me that he had heard that the ship did not appear. And as soon as the news got around, my mother cried. Oh, boy. I even cried. I couldn't help it.
Members of the Chicago press pounced on the story.
You can almost hear the paper boys on the street corner with their headlines, "Lost Christmas Tree Ship," "Ferocious Gale."
This was high drama. Would Chicago get Christmas trees this year? And you had a rapt readership.
Speculation ran rampant. Many wondered why Shinnaman hadn't been able to come into port somewhere along the Wisconsin coast. Fellow sailors reasoned that Shinnaman had probably lessened the sails so that the ship would be more stable in the dangerously high winds. But combined with the icy conditions, this may have made it impossible for the crew to alter their course.
They didn't have a main, they didn't have a mizzen. They only had the sails up forward. And at that point of sail, with the wind direction being what it was, maybe they were unable to turn toward shore. They didn't have any choice.
Had the Great Lake engulfed the frozen schooner and her cargo of Christmas trees? As the days went by, what happened to Captain Shinnaman and his crew remained a mystery. Meanwhile, the Shinnaman family was inundated with telephone calls and letters from people who believed they had seen the Rouse Simmons.
It was an emotional roller coaster for them. There were periods of hope and periods of distress. These intensified with every glimmer of news, every possible sighting, every moment where someone remembers seeing something somewhere.
Even though it looked bleak, Barbara Shinnaman and her daughters clung to the hope that Herman would still come back to them. As the days turned into weeks and there was still no word from the Christmas tree ship, Barbara realized that her husband was never coming home. Devastated and exhausted, she spent days in her room and saw only members of her family.
This was a woman who was in acute grief over the loss of her husband and had no idea what the future of her family would be.
It was Elsie, the Shinnaman's eldest daughter, who acted as spokeswoman for the family.
Elsie was the person who really presented the public face for the family in the newspaper stories.
On December 12th, Elsie was quoted as saying, "One never knows what they can do until they have to. I am going to make an attempt to carry on Father's Christmas tree business." Days later, in an eerie twist, a trainload of evergreens from Michigan arrived in Chicago. Herman Shinnaman had sent a shipment of extra trees just before embarking on his final voyage. Elsie knew exactly what her father would have wanted her to do. The captain's feisty daughter acquired a schooner and had it docked by the Clark Street Bridge.
She sold the Christmas trees from a deck of a schooner called the Oneida in the Chicago River. And so that kept alive the tradition of the Christmas tree ship in 1912.
Although there was a great sadness involved in the Christmas season of 1912, the Shinnamans had a resilience that is quite extraordinary.
But many Chicagoans felt their holiday celebrations would never be the same without the Christmas tree ship and its beloved captain. As families carried their trees home that year, they still couldn't help wondering what had really happened to Herman Shinnaman. December 1912. Chicagoans mourned the loss of the Christmas tree ship, its crew, and its jovial captain, Herman Shinnaman. Newspapers all over the Great Lakes covered the story daily, but not always accurately.
Even when they didn't have good information, they would print the speculations. When they didn't have good speculations, they would simply use wholesale fabrication.
The most well-known was a story which claimed that a message in a bottle had been found. In it was a farewell letter from Herman Shinnaman.
There's one small problem with the note in the bottle, and that is that the note in the bottle was apparently written about 10 days after the Rouse Simmons was lost. So it couldn't have come from Herman Shinnaman's hand.
When a ship goes down in the open sea with all hands, it's a mystery. And we don't like mysteries. We like to have closure. We like to have answers. And people tried to go ahead and write their own answers to the story.
Whatever the truth behind the tall tales, Chicagoans were deeply saddened by the tragedy. For Barbara Shinnaman and her daughters, the future looked hopeless. The family was deeply in debt.
When the Rouse Simmons went down, their entire profit for the year, their entire inventory, if you will, went down with it. Mrs. Shinnaman responds to this debt with a determination and an indomitable strength. She promises that every penny will be paid. Why? Because it is what my husband would want me to do.
The next year, Barbara Shinnaman and Elsie both went up to Thompson, Michigan, and they contracted for the harvesting of Christmas trees.
Barbara Shinnaman, when women didn't even have the right to vote, made the decision to carry on in the tradition of everything Captain Herman believed in. She said as long as she lived, as long as she had breath in her, she would continue this trip to the North Woods because she loved it so.
But this time they sent all the trees back by train.
Barbara was not going to risk the lives of sailors out on the lake again. They would bring the trees back to Chicago, and they would rent a vessel and tie it up along the Chicago River and sell the trees as they had when Herman was still alive.
When the next December rolled around, Chicagoans couldn't believe their eyes. Barbara, Elsie, Hazel, and Pearl were proudly selling their trees and wreaths from a schooner docked at the Clark Street Bridge. Against all odds, the Shinnamans and their Christmas tree ship were again ushering in the holiday season.
For people who bought trees from the Shinnamans, it was a wonderful time to see them back and to know that they were still carrying on with the tradition. They were a close family. This tragedy could easily have ruined the Shinnamans, but they carried on. I think it was a strong symbol of unity and perseverance.
For 20 years, Barbara imported trees, and she was known as a Christmas tree lady.
Barbara became an institution herself.
And like her husband, she made sure that no one went without a Christmas tree.
A wonderful Chicago Tribune photograph of Barbara giving Christmas trees away to two little boys. That particular year, she gave away many Christmas trees to children.
Barbara Shinnaman carried on the family business until her death in 1933. Her daughters, who now had families of their own, left the Christmas tree business 1 year later. Their story, however, was far from over.
For years after the Rouse Simmons was lost, fishermen off Raleigh Point would claim that they pulled up remnants of Christmas trees. And a lot of people said, hey, this is just some folklore.
No one really knew what happened to the Rouse Simmons. Many guessed what led to its tragic ending.
But a diver named Kent Bellrichard believed he knew where to look. In 1971, using the last known location of the Christmas tree ship as a reference, Bellrichard discovered the hull of a schooner off the coast of Wisconsin in over 160 feet of water. As he began to explore the wreck, an extraordinary sight came into view. The remnants of hundreds of spruce trees scattered in the hold of the submerged vessel. It was the wreck of the Rouse Simmons. After 59 years, the fabled Christmas tree ship had been found.
And there was the Rouse Simmons after all of these years, preserved in the frigid waters. It was upright and it was intact.
It now appears that the Christmas tree ship, heavily loaded with cargo and covered in ice, went straight to the bottom of the lake.
And she was right where you would have expected her to be, off Two Rivers Point between Kewaunee and Two Rivers, Wisconsin.
To this day, remnants of spruce trees can be seen in the hold of the old schooner. The discovery of the Christmas tree ship sparked a renewed interest in the Shinnaman family and the wonderful holiday traditions they represented.
They help us try to remember what the holiday's all about. And the story of the Christmas tree ship is a story that can bring Chicagoans together across generations.
In 1986, painter Charles Vickery contributed to the legend of the Christmas tree ship by producing a popular series of paintings.
There's also a fantastic musical based on the Christmas tree ship story.
Over the last 100 years, the poets have written of it, the singer-songwriters have sung of it, the painters have painted it. It's about the true meaning of Christmas. And now we see with the Coast Guard volunteers coming forth to say, we too want to step into this story and make it ours.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Merry Christmas, everyone. Enjoy it.
As the last of this year's shipment of Christmas trees are handed out to grateful Chicago families, it is clear that the legacy of the Shinnaman family is alive and well.
Well, the only thing I can say then is Merry Christmas, everybody.